Kapilji, if you could make me host, that would be great.
Sure. All done.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay, great.
Okay.
Hello, good morning, Kapilji. Welcome. We're just going to get the stream synchronized and then get the viewers synchronized with the stream. Just give me a second. So at this moment in time, Kapilji, the Zoom is putting you in the frame. So bear with me a second. And I think we're just about ready to go. I'm just waiting for the YouTube stream to catch up with us. Namaste, good morning, and Jai Shri Ram to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our review of the events in Leicester. Before we jump in, I'm just going to set the scene for you as to what you can expect this morning. So we have put together a global seminar, a webinar, which will pull together a number of people who've been studying and observing the events that occurred in Leicester over the last few weeks, the latter half of September. We have people who will be joining from Australia. We have observers from the US. We've also got a number of participants who are watching what's been going on here in the UK. We have some first-hand speakers, people who were on the ground, who witnessed what had happened. And we also have relatives and family of participants. As you can imagine, putting something like this together is a fairly significant task and has involved a technical team based in India, as also here in the UK. So this morning, we're going to have the brief introductions now. I'll introduce you to who our speakers are. And then we're going to pause for a few moments before we start the actual first session, and that will be starting in probably about 15 minutes time. At this moment, we've got people who are logging in, some of them logging into Zoom. We're getting messages coming through. We've also got people who I think are having difficulty with the YouTube stream. So we're just going to wait until the YouTube stream stabilizes. But thank you very much for joining in and for participating in this. The purpose of our session today is actually twofold. One is to help everybody understand what has really happened. One thing we noticed was that there was so much information, some of it fake, some of it new, the sequence of events, the actual events themselves. Much of it was, shall we say, we received it as a deluge and we didn't have an opportunity to understand and to process what was really going on. I've spoken to many people who actually had heard that there was something going in Leicester, but they didn't know the details of what was going on in Leicester. So our hope today is to try and give everybody an understanding of the specifics that have happened, and so that everybody in our community is fully aware of the reality of what happened. And so on that basis, we can decide on what to do and how to prepare for a future in England where this has actually occurred. The second task that we're going to try and achieve is to start the process of gathering information, to start the process of collating evidence. We have had so many people send us written records, videos in abundance. Lots of information has come through to us, and we're going to start to collate it. Our hope is that at some point in time, the evidence that you've all kindly shared with us, we can put together, compile it, and then present it to the authorities when their public inquiry starts to really move into that stage. So there are twofold objectives. What I would ask you to do is please recognize that this is the beginning of a process. This is the first of what I think are going to be many sessions where we start to dig deeper into the 4 areas which I think we've identified as areas of concern. The first of those areas is media, and the second is policing. The third we will dive into is interfaith, and the last one will actually be community as well. We had originally planned to have all 4 sessions this morning, but we've already received so much information and so many people who wanted to participate that we've broken it down into 2 areas. Broadly speaking, the 2 areas that we're going to focus on today are going to be the role of media, and then we'll move to what we know about the role of the police authorities, the manner in which they responded, etc. But even having said that, these are going to be relatively introductory sessions. Information is still emerging about both of those. We're still getting a better understanding of exactly how the police responded, and we're hoping that at a later point we will get interaction from them live in our sessions. So it's the beginning of a process. The end result of this, I hope, will be that our British Hindu community and the international Hindu community will have all the information they need to understand what needs to be done in order to navigate this new reality. In the past, the manner in which we have interacted, the manner in which we have, shall we say, lived in this country has been a very passive manner, not really engaging either with the institutions or indeed with public life. But I don't think we have that option anymore. And I'm hoping that with everybody's participation, we can all equip each other with everything we need to be able to better negotiate, to better integrate, and to better operate in this new United Kingdom. So in a few moments, I'm going to introduce you to our speakers as they come on board. Firstly, I'm going to introduce you to one of our long-standing participants in the media space. He's a gentleman who is an acknowledged journalist. He has been, shall we say, commenting on the experience of being a British Hindu in this country. And many of you will have read some of his columns. Gopalji, I'm going to invite you just to say a few words. Please do bear in mind that the main session will start in about 10 minutes time. So it'd be nice to just say hello to the audience and introduce yourself. Gopalji.
Namaste to everyone. It's a pleasure to take part in this open session. It's always important for us as a community, but also the wider community to understand, to appreciate some of the events that have been unfolding. And in the context of this nation, where do they fit in? And what are the lessons that we need to learn? Not just us as a community, but certainly the wider community and also those in power and what they need to understand as well. And I hope that this goes somewhere towards setting the agenda for the policymakers to understand better their roles and responsibilities as well. So to everyone out there, I say, keep viewing. Your commentary is going to be very important. Your understanding is going to be important. And I look forward to this session and many other sessions like this as well.
Hello, sorry, Gopalji, thank you so much for your contribution there. We're now moving to our contribution from, just a brief introduction from speaker one. We have a number of people who have wanted to participate, but were unable to feel comfortable enough in order to introduce themselves directly, to present themselves and to speak. I hope many people have understood that the results of the last 2 weeks in September have caused a great deal of fear. Many people wanted to be able to speak out. Many people wanted to tell their stories, but there is still a residual element of fear of consequences. We know that even in this moment of time, we have a lot of people who are perhaps being harassed, they're being bullied, they're being targeted, merely for speaking out. And so we will have the opportunity to hear from one such person who has, shall we say, grassroots experience of what actually happened, and desperately wanted to be able to share her experiences and her understanding, but to be able to do so in a safe environment. We hope that this is going to be a safe environment. It's vitally important for all of us that we have the chance to be able to speak openly. And so I'm going to introduce her as speaker one, and perhaps speaker one could just share a few words as to what it was she experienced and why she wanted to speak with us today. So I'm going to try and bring speaker one into the conversation.
Hello. Hi. Namaste. Thank you to all of those that have been involved in organising this and to all of those attending as well. So I'm somebody who my parents refer to as the younger generation. And so I've been very active on social media and had the opportunity to observe what's been happening on social media that has translated into real life events affecting Hindus in real life at their places of worship, for example. And also just for Hindus who are expressing their Hindu identity, who have been targeted indiscriminately. And as Satishji mentioned, there are some concerns and anxieties of Hindus talking openly about these things. And I commend, those organising this today to give us the opportunity for Hindus to have a voice. My personal concern is that I have seen false allegations and tropes being thrown at people merely for expressing their identity or being vocal around concerns that they may have. And I saw actually a case being reported on, I think it was Birmingham News just yesterday, of a Sikh girl actually who spoke up about the attacks on the mandir in Smethwick, and she has as a result been attacked by both people from her own community and other communities, and threatened as well. So she's a young schoolgirl and she's been threatened by her classmates, so the police are now involved in that. So I'm thankful for this forum. I think it'll be very productive to understand and address these and other issues better, and I'll go on to elaborate on my personal experiences when I speak a little more later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, speaker one. It's a tragedy that we're in a world where people are so fearful of speaking out openly that it has to be done under conditions of anonymity. But we accept that that's the situation. And let's proceed. So thank you very much for bearing with us for this introductory session. It's given us a chance to just test the technology. And we have got our speakers are coming into the rooms now. So if you will bear with me for a few moments, I'm going to refresh and start a new session with more speakers in. We will be returning to you within hopefully no more than 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you very much. We'll see you very shortly.
loads of comment back. Okay, so just remember every time, just quickly, as quickly as you can.
Sure.
Okay, you're live.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of you, we're almost live. So
Sure.
Here we go. Hopefully the stream will come through from Australia. We're just waiting. Ah, we're live. Right, thank you so much for allowing us to do that. Let's say this is our first broadcast using this incredible global platform. And we're trying to synchronize an Australian connection with us. We have Sarah Gates, who's a researcher who'll be joining us as soon as she can. We have got Gopaji here already. And Gopaji, can I switch over to you for a moment for you to get the process underway? You sent me a wonderful amount of information about your observations about the historical aspects of our relationship with other communities in this country, spanning, I think you were going back to almost 30 years of observations. So I think you have an incredible perspective to set all of this in context. So over to you.
Certainly, but probably more than 30 years. We've actually had in this country many challenges as immigrants coming to the nation, challenges of actually fitting in, of integrating, of actually trying to find our place in society. And when the early exodus actually took place, that's obviously from East Africa, the Kenyan one, followed by the Ugandan one. We saw the good and the bad side of British society at that time. The bad side was that we certainly had, in those days, quite a strong presence of the National Front, the far-right groups and so on. But at the same time, we also saw some brilliant, beautiful hosting by so many cities and towns throughout the UK that actually welcomed our people with open arms. You'll actually see videos of complete villages coming out and saying to East African Asians, don't worry, we'll do our best to look after you. So there's always the good, and there's always sometimes the bad as well. We've got to take that with a pinch of salt. Now, in the early days, we faced most of the challenges from the far right. So the, let's say in quotes, the enemy was fairly clear, and British society knew exactly where that was coming from. And we took that on and we progressed. We not defeated them, but we succeeded despite the challenges that were coming through to us. And we saw in the 70s, 80s, and 90s a slightly different variation. So, for example, there was a discussion about what's actually happening in the Northwest, the Northeast, and so on. Well, I actually grew up in the Northwest, and I can say to you that when Navratri and Diwali used to take place, and we used to actually have the Ras Garba sessions and so on, there were certain communities who either were not keen on what we were doing, or they wanted to infiltrate and take part. And from what I could gather, and I was a young lad at that time, from what I could gather, it was in order to pursue Hindu girls. And obviously, us Hindu boys were in a position where we acted as a barrier. So those challenges were there as well. And we have seen that on and off on a cycle for most of the time that we've actually been here. But more recently, one of the things that I've noticed is that there appears to be what I call an Islamist element, which is different. It's quite extreme. It's very severe. It's one that seems to be localized, so it's the local community, but the ideology appears to come from overseas. It's been imported. These notions from very extremists from across the world have been accepted by our citizens in this country. You know, when I say our, I mean all our citizens. That includes the whole complete Muslim community as well. And within that, it appears that some have actually gone very extreme, and that little group there can actually cause many difficulties. And at the same time, we're actually seeing import, as I call it, of many refugees with many, many challenges. They come from both on nations. They come from an ideology which varies from one sect to another, one nation to another. And this mix, or as we Hindus would call this khichdi, has come together with competing groups trying to outdo each other. And it seems that in the old days, though it's not gone away, the target has always been the Jewish community. That focus, I fear, has actually changed, and it's now become the Hindu community. Why would they actually consider challenging the Hindu community? Because we're in a space where we are well integrated. We are performing way beyond our expectations and everyone else's expectations. We are net contributors to this nation. Our community, I think the last data statistics that I saw, only 359 Hindus are in jail out of a population of 1.5 million. Now, that's the lowest proportion of any ethnicity or any faith group. In fact, it is so low that the official statistics classify it as 0%. So we got such great things to celebrate, and we do celebrate and we take part. And then we realize that there are still some extremists out there who actually wish to harm us. And what we saw in Leicester, let's be very clear, when it comes to cricket or football, the rivalries go on, not just in this country, throughout the world. Sometimes they get out of hand, but then they come back and it carries on. That's been the case. So this has got nothing to do with cricket. This is actually to do with an extremist element that actually took over and said, we actually want to make a point. And they did make a point. And their toolkit was attack, make sure that on social media, you actually have the engine of this toolkit that goes into operation to actually lie about the events. This is complete and utter lies which they were actually propagating. And their main purpose was to create anarchy. They actually wanted to put fear into a population, a subpopulation called the Hindu population, and to make sure that we were subjugated, as historically many have tried to actually do that to us. And at that time, it is only right and proper that sometimes a community comes out and says, you know, this is not right. This is not British. This is not the way we do this. The streets of Great Britain belong to all of us. You cannot section off one particular part and say, this is ours, and how dare Hindus actually walk through this, or how dare Hindus actually do a protest march. We can all do that. We've seen protests up and down the country. Extinction Rebellion do protests, day in and day out. The unions do this day in, day out. So why can't the Hindus do that to actually express their displeasure of what might be happening in society? So they took that and started attacking Hindus. And then they actually have friends in media. The BBC basically took the fake narrative, as did The Guardian, that took up the fake narrative. And there were some journalists within this, and I shan't name them, but I think everyone who wants to find out can actually find these names online very, very quickly. Some journalists who actually had a motive to actually be anti-Hindu, and they propagated the lies. So you have social media and the engine of social media being used to actually promote lies, fake news, and to spread hatred. And I think this is the element that is so dangerous. When you spread hatred and you incite violence, we cannot accept that. Not in UK, not on our streets. It doesn't matter who you are. As far as the British people are concerned, no, we are not going to accept that. And we saw the BBC literally this week roll back and say, sorry, we made an error. We actually said things and we published things, and we actually had a narrative which was based on total lies. The Guardian, in fact, had to come back and change their narrative because they realized that they were so far off the truth that they were looking silly. Not just silly, they were looking like the bigots that they are. and I call them bigots. Here it is live on your stream. I challenge the Guardian right now in front of this global audience, and I challenge the Guardian and the BBC, if you dare have the capacity and the integrity and the honesty to actually tell the truth, I am ready, willing, and able to take that mantle on, and I will come live on your shows and prove to you how wrong you are. Do you have that integrity and honesty? They will not. They will run away. The Guardian always runs away. So there's a lot more we can pack in, but generally speaking, the media was not hijacked. Okay, the media took an active part. Some in the media took an active part in this anarchy, and they did so willingly, knowingly, and willfully to actually damage the Hindu community. It's almost as if they were the mouthpiece of the Islamists. That is a danger.
Thank you, Kapali. I'm just trying to get the stream back. Whilst we're waiting, I've got a quick question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned The Guardian. Obviously, you have a lot of experience in publishing articles. Have you ever managed to get an article published in The Guardian or the BBC which presented a completely pro-Hindu, pro-India narrative? Have you encountered one? Do you know of a journalist who has managed to achieve this?
Not to my knowledge, and it's not even having to be pro. I mean, as a journalist, I would say to everyone, I don't actually want a narrative which is pro this or pro that. I actually want a balanced article, a balanced perspective. Show the truth. If you show the truth, if the truth is damaging to you or me or somebody from our community, so be it. Because that's the truth. You cannot run away from the truth. But why am I not afraid of the truth? Because I know the truth is on my side. I know the truth is on our side. The truth was very simple. In this case of Leicester, you are doing Ganesh Puja. You're celebrating one of the most beautiful festivals of inclusiveness, of actually bringing world peace. And a family is gathered. And then you actually have 5, 6, 7 youths from the Muslim community. They think it's a joke to actually throw eggs. It's a bit like us going to a mosque and throwing pork or something like that. Would that be acceptable? As Hindus, we would never, ever do that. In fact, the thought does not even occur in our minds. Whereas these people did that. And from there stemmed the anarchy. But what did the media do? The BBC and the Guardian? They changed the narrative and said Muslims were attacked. What do you mean Muslims were attacked? There's absolutely cast iron proof that in fact it's the Hindus who were attacked. Now, then there was this news that was being spread by another one of these Islamists, Freeman Majid. And what did he do? He said, I've actually gone, I've spoken to people in Leicester, I've spoken to this young woman, and she has categorically said to me that she was going to be abducted by Hindus. And then they went out and actually started posting images of this Hindu youth and the images of his car and so on. And suddenly there was a mob, not a group. Now it was a mob of Islamists that gathered around the home of the parents of this young man to actually cause them harm. And had it not been for some of our Hindu members in Leicester who quickly got the police to get there on time, there could have been not injuries, could have been, worse things than that.
Indeed, indeed. Well, we're going to dig a little
later,
deeper
I know,
into that in a moment. So we have speaker one who's with us now, and I'd like to ask the young lady to unmute herself if she possibly could. And the question that I'd like her to possibly start with is that as a person who was witnessing this firsthand and being there in Leicester, one of the places where we turn to find out what's going on and use that information to inform our next choices. Do we need to be safe? Do we need to call the police? Do we need to call emergency services? Should we leave the location we're at? Does it present a threat? is often the media. And the media is basically in two now, isn't it? We've got social media, which is almost instantaneous, and then we've got conventional media, which not being so instantaneous, but tends to be a bit more reliable. When you look at the BBC tweets, you look at the Guardian's tweets, etc., then you tend to think that they've done the conventional tasks of verifying, vetting, and checking. Is it balanced? Is it borne out by evidence? And so you rely on those a little bit more. I don't think that's what happened this time round. So speaker one, if you could unmute, and please do join us.
Hi there. Hi, yes, absolutely. And I think, as Kapilji has been saying, you know, he's very experienced and been monitoring comprehensively how recent issues have been reported by mainstream media. And I will mention that in what I go on to say. But my forte has been on social media, so I'll start with that. And yeah, just to introduce myself again. So I'm a Hindu who has been observing recent events. And what I'll speak about is based upon my conversations with Hindus in the UK and to relay some of the concerns that have been shared with me. So obviously we have Navratri now, and I know many of us were fearful about celebrating as usual. And I have to say, from observing Navratri so far in Leicester, the police have done a great job through social media themselves, for example, through using their comms channels to reassure the Hindu community. Before Navratri started, they said that they would ensure that there's a visible and dedicated police presence to ensure that everyone can celebrate safely. And also a charity that specializes in security advice, independent of the police, kindly held a number of seminars for Hindus and organizers in the lead up to Navratri. But it's sad that, you know, this has been necessary. It's sad that these assurances, security guidances and plans have been necessary for our community that has always had a proud history of enthusiastic integration and successful contributions to the UK. Also a community that has been reported as substantially contributing to all aspects of British life, and a community, which I think has been mentioned before, with a prisoner population of 0%. And our pluralistic values of mutual respect, tolerance and peace are at the core of our religious beliefs, and these extend out into our characteristics, which are very much aligned with the fundamental British values of tolerance, mutual respect, democracy, rule of law, and individual liberty. So, as many are asking, it begs the question on why things got so bad for Hindus in the UK that the Indian High Commission in the UK had to demand immediate action against those involved in attacks against Hindu premises and symbols, and for protection for those affected. And yeah, coming onto social media, from my experience, it's been disinformation, false allegations, and the usages of tropes that have led to British Hindus being maligned. And a study actually conducted on anti-Hindu disinformation on social media by Rutgers University found that disinformation tropes are deliberate to spread Hindu phobia, and that online hate speech can lead to real-world violence. And we've seen in Leicester that one of the arrested has said that he was directly influenced by what he had seen on social media. And for the people that I've spoken to, the amount of disinformation that they've seen has been shocking for them. So just to mention a number of them: allegations against Hindus of kidnapping, perpetrating many stabbings, a mosque attack, a traffic warden being attacked. They've all been disproved by the police, but not before they gained huge traction on social media. And also tropes of Hindus and Mandirs being RSS or fascist have become commonplace. And this has impacted Hindus who have seen this on social media, but also Hindus and their places of worship who have paid the price with intimidation, harassment and violence spreading onto the streets of the UK. It's also been saddening to hear of police officers and a police dog who have been injured, and I can only imagine the amount of police resources that have been wasted in countering the numerous false allegations. And whilst we appreciate and recognise the need for policing of Hindu places of worship during this time, they should not be under threat in a democracy, and we hope for complete security and safety, both emotional and physical, to be restored to the Hindu community of the UK, for them to be able to go on living freely without issue or complaint as they always have done, and for the police resources to be available as needed elsewhere. So I have seen some lovely videos of Gurba being celebrated this year, which has been, you know, comforting, reassuring to see this lively demonstration of Navratri in the UK, as we've had for many years. But I have also been upset to hear from Hindus personally who have not attended Navratri as usual. They've removed Hindu expressing their identity as they've always enjoyed doing in the UK due to the fear that has become embedded in them. I've heard both from Hindus who want to keep their head down, who are fearful due to the current climate, where they feel they could be targeted indiscriminately. But I've also heard from Hindus who are vocal and proud Hindus, and they are also fearful. And I find this very worrying, as this reality appears to contrast with the freedom of thought, opinions, and expressions that are fundamental aspects of the Human Rights Act and are the bedrock of this thriving democracy. There have also been worries, for example, about free movement and segregation due to references to particular areas on social media and by speakers who have a large following. And I think the crux of this is that people are traumatized. They've been dismayed at the amount of anti-Hindu sentiments that have happened both online and offline. And they say that they've never expected that hatred driven by false news could travel so far and so freely. And they'd expect a stronger, wider, and clearer condemnation, recognition, and control, and for what they read in the media to be reported with impartiality and integrity. They say that it's not just the events of the 17th of September that have shocked them, where we saw the Shivalaya Mandir in Leicester being targeted, but also videos from before this date, from the 6th of September, showing Hindus in Leicester phoning the police in fear and distress about groups outside of their homes, vandalizing their properties and cars, pulling down a religious flag, brandishing a knife, and using language such as mushrik, meaning polytheist. The Hindus that I've spoken to feel that damage has been done. There's been a lot of upset at seeing people in their spiritual homes, their mandirs, being targeted and threatened for supposedly being extremist or RSS. Many Hindus I've spoken to had never even heard of the RSS until they were accused of being this very thing themselves. The opinions, let alone the names, are not known about the devotees that have been inside these mandirs that have been targeted or threatened. And all that has been known about them is that they are Hindu. And to me, that is a clear display of anti-Hindu sentiments. One friend I spoke to, she regularly attends the mandir that was targeted. And she is a law-abiding, hardworking citizen. She doesn't follow Indian news. And now she's suddenly worried about being associated with accusations of being an extremist. But she's also worried about her father, who's also a law-abiding, hardworking citizen, who does happen to follow Indian news and does like the Indian Prime Minister. But he has found the notion of Indian politics existing in the UK laughable and absurd. He's always recognised the clear distinction between the UK and India, and he's a proud British citizen. But now he is also fearful for the safety of himself and his family for having an opinion. And I want to end by sharing what some commentators on the recent issues have said. So Charlotte Littlewood, former counter-extremism coordinator for the UK government, has said that the Hindu community have been used as scapegoats. They are less libellous, which has resulted in lazy reporting with zero repercussions, with mainstream media putting balance first and facts second. And Chris Blackburn, a political analyst, has acknowledged that many British Hindus are extremely anxious. They feel they have a target on their backs, and that everyone that has pushed the conspiracy of the RSS hand in Leicester needs to apologise for the fallout, mentioning both The Guardian and The Independent. However, just yesterday, there was a youth event organised by a registered charity in Leicester, with 6 prominent scholars and key community members leading, and a number of these have been responsible for sharing these very tropes. So I think going forward, Hindus in the UK want to continue doing what they do and have always done so well. Keenly contribute without complaint, embrace and extend mutual respect, live harmoniously, safeguard, preserve and express their traditions and beliefs, and frankly, just get on with their lives without issue. But it is imperative that the whole system acts to uphold and protect their online and offline safety, freedoms, beliefs and rights. Thank you.
If I can just pick up on one or two things that Speaker One mentioned, and that was very, very comprehensive. And I think much of what you said resonates with so many within our community as well. And I have heard very, very similar stories as well. So I concur with your sentiments that you expressed. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Speaker One, is obviously the extremists have been in a position where they have directly or indirectly used threats either via social media or physical presence. How has that actually affected you as a person, your psyche, your very being? Because people need to understand that there are real things that actually happen to real people in real life when there are such threats upon them. So from your perspective, what are your fears? What is it that affected you? You know, deep down in your heart, you sit down and you said to yourself, what is going on? Well, in that case, please tell us, what is it that you felt?
Yeah, so I personally, for the past few weeks, have actually been waking up with something that feels like a hole in my heart, just in sheer disbelief at the fact that, you know, this has come to the extent where mandirs across the UK have been targeted, Hindus indiscriminately with Hindus' names have been the subject of false allegations and tropes that are just based in falsehoods. And it seems here that these falsehoods are prevailing over the truth. And the truth and righteousness is something that I personally hold very close to my heart. And I think in terms of, you know, how it's affecting and continuing to affect myself and others, speaking on behalf of others that I have spoken to, I think people feel like they are being maligned simply for existing on one level, but then also for being vocal. So they're being vocal to express their identity, to defend their freedom to express their identity. And merely for doing this, they are feeling threatened. On social media, one of the pages has shared a post documenting rape threats that Hindus have received. Hindu girls with Hindu names, so purely based on the fact that they have Hindu names, they have received rape threats and conversion threats. There have been threats of cleansing. There have been threats likening the situation in Leicester to a call for action similar to what happened in Kashmir. There have been threats of violence. There's been abusive language used. There's been our beliefs that have been mocked. For example, Hindu beliefs in reincarnation, and the fact that many Hindus are vegetarian based upon their beliefs in ahimsa, for example. So, you know, these have been mocked by speakers with large followings and publicly. And I just feel terrified and shocked that this has been allowed to continue, and there appears to have been no direct recognition or addressing of these, what I would call anti-Hindu sentiments and Hindu-phobic attacks.
Okay. Before I hand over to Satishji, just one thing as terms of feedback straight away for you, speaker one, so that you know you're not alone. I've just literally, whilst we were actually online, had a message from my connections in Birmingham, and they just sent messages saying they are absolutely proud of you, speaker one, for actually telling the truth as it is, and they concur with their experience of what actually took place in Birmingham as well. So I think you speak not just for yourself, but you actually speak for the oppressed, the people, the victims, and I think you put that very nicely. So I think I'll hand over the mic to Satishji now.
Thank you very much, Kapilji. And also, I'd just like to echo what you have just said about the courage it takes to be able to speak at this sort of a time on these issues and subjects. Just listening to you, I had a question that sprang to my mind. Do you think we will ever get back to pre-Leicester tranquility and comfort? You know, I was trying to work out, is there a roadmap whereby the families whose homes were attacked, doors were kicked in, symbols of their religious identity were used to identify them for further violence? Do you think those families will ever be able to get back to a situation where they don't have to look over their shoulder, where they're quite comfortable that they're not going to be targeted? Or are we now in a post-Leicester reality? I've had calls from young Hindus and have been working in terms of doing trauma counseling and helping them to come to an understanding that the future is still very much in our grasp and we need to engage. But there is definitely a sense of discomfort and unease. Do you think we'll get back to pre-Leicester days, or will this be a pivotal moment?
I have faith that we can. One of the reasons is that I believe that our belief system, so what is at the core of our beliefs, are principles that are conducive to harmony. So inner harmony, societal harmony, global harmony. And that's not changing about our belief systems. So I think we are ready, we are prepared. to be the peace-loving people that we always have been. But what needs to happen now is responsibility needs to be taken. So those who have been involved in this, and there appear to be many that have been involved in this, they need to be held accountable. I think education needs to happen on a lot of these tropes that are being used. And I think conversations need to be had by those in power on how to address this on the kind of widespread scale that we're seeing this. So I think responsibility of the media in reporting factually, and recognising the real anti-Hindu sentiments that are there across the UK. I think the responsibility of faith leaders from all sides involved in condemning anti-Hindu sentiments and ensuring that they do not hold platforms for these anti-Hindu sentiments to fester further. The responsibility of the authorities in bringing all those involved to account, and of politicians as well. So I think this has been raised in Parliament, and Hinduphobia has been raised in Parliament by Theresa Villiers MP and Bob Blackman MP as well. And I think I saw actually that on the long-standing issue of anti-Semitism, that there was a government committee report that was produced and presented to Parliament, and it influences and dictates policies and investigation of anti-Semitic crimes in the UK. And I don't know if we'll have to, if we'll be in a place where we'll have to do something like this for these Hinduphobic sentiments as well, depending on, you know, I guess the police will drive that depending on their reporting that they've received to actually share how much of a wide-scale issue this is internally.
Okay, I mean, one of the things that comes across to me, Speaker One, is, and I have been sent many messages, I've spoken to many people, not just in Leicester, but in Birmingham and across the country as well. For example, even in Wembley as well. And one of the things that came across very powerfully was that people just felt that they were unable to speak out for fear of either that they would be attacked directly, or that their families or someone within their community would be attacked directly. And it's almost as if the extremists are actually using a toolkit, the toolkit being that you threaten people with very severe consequences of violence, of hatred. As you mentioned, threats of rape to young girls and things like that. Basically, in order to stifle the voice of those who actually wish to tell the truth, the voice of the victims. You obviously come across that as well. And one wonders how social media is actually going to tackle that, because one of the things that I think you mentioned was social media was proactive. And it being proactive, people like, or entities like Twitter, Facebook, and so on, they were not fast enough, if at all, to stop the spread of these lies. And I think there is a lesson for us to actually make it very clear to those entities that they are willfully negligent in their duty of care to the wider community. If this had actually gone completely out of control, it could have led to many disasters. Fortunately, we Hindus were in a position to actually absorb so much of this hate and not react. Now, one of the things that comes to my mind is that in Leicester, with Diwali coming, and we're going to have, I hope, as always, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 people on Melton Road, rejoicing, bringing not just the Hindu community, but the wider community together to say that Diwali is a time for lighting that diva that actually enlightens people. And we as Hindus always hope that the wider community, especially the extremists, will actually be enlightened sufficiently that they will introspect and consider that maybe the game plan of those ideologies which are alien to this nation should not be brought into this nation. So the fear factor alone is enough to dampen and victimize the victims again. Is that something that you actually come across as well?
Yes. On the point of social media being a platform where a lot of this hate speech went unchecked, I think absolutely the social media companies have a massive responsibility in this as well. I know personally that I had reported many posts with false allegations and hate speech. A common trope being used is cow urine drinkers, for example, to Hindus. And it just takes one search of this for hundreds of such results using these tropes to come up. And I reported these, and I know many others have reported these over the course of months, actually, because these tropes have been there for a long time as well, and they've not been removed. And I'm just looking now at Instagram's stance on hate speech, and they say here that they ban common anti-Semitic tropes. They have recognized that anti-Semitism is a huge problem with real life consequences, and that they have responsibility in combating this. And I think something similar needs to happen on Hinduphobia. So I think Hinduphobia needs to be recognized and monitored. Hinduphobic content needs to be monitored through their monitoring techniques that, flag up hate speech, whether that's through keywords or however they do it. But absolutely, we saw here, and as the study said, online hate speech leads to real world violence, real world events. And it's people that have been seeing things, Hindus that have been seeing things on social media and in real life that have been affected. And this is something that cannot be overlooked.
Yeah, I'll hand over to Satishji now.
Thank you, Kapilji, and thank you, Speaker One. One of the objectives of us getting together and trying to get some degree of consensus, some degree of information across all of our community is because the only way I think that we can ensure that mainstream publications like The Guardian, the BBC, etc., do not do this again, and that they fully understand the consequences of what they have done, is to move towards a position where they genuinely publish either an apology or a retraction or an acknowledgement of what has actually happened. Now, they're not going to do that willingly, so we need to be able to compile the evidence as to exactly what was wrong with their publications, and we then need to be able to present the consequences of those publications to them. So this is part of my shout out to everybody who has been kind enough to watch the broadcast today. Please register your details with us at the link will be on the YouTube video, and it's at hinducampaigns.com, so that one, you can get in touch with us and let us know what's happened from your point of view, but also so that we can add your voice to the communications that we're going to be sending out to them. One of the wonderful things which I think Speaker One has sent us quite an elaborate document with lots and lots of evidence, which we're really grateful for, and I hope others will do the same. But one of the things that it has enabled us to understand is that in our community, we have seen an emergence of coherent voices. We have seen the vacuum which had existed up until a relatively recent time suddenly being occupied and populated by almost homegrown voices who have sat down with friends, who have made groups, who have created their own social media voice and been able to project that voice into this vacuum. And that had a remarkable impact. In the past, there would have been silence, but this time we had a number of organizations. There was wonderful work done by Insight, who I know are all volunteers, and they're learning to find their voice, and they're learning how to articulate exactly what's being felt in a manner which is going to serve us all to the highest degree. We had a wonderful participation from, again, an informal voluntary group called REACH, and we're hoping that some of the REACH team will be able to join us in a few moments. But they too filled that vacuum. And when I stepped back to look at the consequences of this community response, it occurred to me that one thing they had also managed to do was to make sure that the Indian social media space was aware of the impact of what was going on and the actual cases that were being reported, what was fake, what was news. And the whole Indian social media space, many influencers, many portals, Swarajya, Op India, many of these portals they picked up the news that was being sent out and they then amplified it even further. I saw one analysis that over 200,000 tweets originated in India. And it's quite funny because that analysis was presenting it as though that was India trying to, shall we say, create a false news storm. But it's perfectly natural for family, for friends. We are part of the Indian diaspora. We're very connected with the Indian diaspora. So on what basis would there be something to criticize about the fact that a lot of tweets were then emanating from India? This was the population itself, the communities themselves expressing their concern at what had happened. And I think the volume that was created here in the UK and the volume that then was picked up and amplified further from India, it all contributed towards pushing back this fake news rhetoric. And that's the first time I've seen this. I'm hoping that we can rely on this in future and that all of us have been able to use this opportunity to make this ecosystem, which is now emerging, a little bit stronger. Gopalji, have you seen such a, shall we say, well-organized, concerted, focused response in such a short space of time in your years of observing these things?
Not so much, to be honest. What tends to happen is that there's usually a knee-jerk reaction. Sometimes you've got multiple entities that speak over each other. Sometimes the message is lost. I think what happened in Leicester actually got through to everyone. And it was quite clear that people were unhappy, not just in Leicester. I mean, can you imagine people in London, Birmingham, Bolton, Leeds, it doesn't matter where you are, you're affected because you could see yourself in the people of Leicester. You understood straight away what they were going through. You empathize with their experience, and you're so far away that you can't do much, but the bit you can do was show support. So people did come together, whilst they were not openly exposing themselves, purely because what Speaker once said, which is that there were these threats, wild threats against many in our community, that if they did something or said something, that there would be consequences. And there was still a good number of people who stuck their neck out and said, enough is enough. So I think we're now progressing as a community to the next level. We're not there, Satishji. We've got a lot to do. If I give you an example, the Jewish community was in this space about 30 years ago, where they were being attacked left, right, and center. They were being victimized. They were being ridiculed. So much negativity that was actually taking place. And the Board of Deputies was doing its best. But then they came up with the Community Security Trust, a specialist unit. Their task was the welfare and the well-being of all the Jewish community throughout the nation. And they put together a very coherent program. They have experts lined up to do things in a very particular way. They are resourced very well. And today, can I say, if there is any risk of even one Jewish person being in threat, the whole Jewish community and the Community Security Trust would stand together, and within minutes, even the Home Secretary would be aware that their duty of care. So I think we've got a long way to go, but we made a start. And let's hope that we awaken a lot more people in our community to this effect as well.
Thank you, Gopalji. Before I move to our next speaker, I just wanted to appreciate Speaker One for the courage in coming onto a public platform and talking about these issues, and thank her also for her diligence and hard work in compiling the evidence that she sent to us. It's really appreciated. And I'm hoping that others seeing her example will also be, shall we say, encouraged to start to step forward and engage in public conversations. It's remarkable to see that we generally don't engage in the public conversation on most things. because we're a self-managed community, because we do our own dharmic thing, which generally causes nobody any complications or any issues, we mistakenly believe that that's all we need to do, but it's not. We contribute in many areas, in many places. One area we don't contribute in yet so far is this area of shifting and helping to contribute towards the public dialogue on the direction that this country is moving in. So Speaker One, thank you so much for that. And I say I really appreciate the courage that you've taken. My best and best wishes for you there in Leicester, and also our compliments to your parents. I know that they will have been worried about your participation, but do express our appreciation for supporting you and, as I say, for you to make this contribution. If you'd like to make a few closing remarks before I move on to the next speaker, please do so. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope next time to be able to come on with my real life identity. But I think, as been alluded to by a couple of us here, you know, is this concern and real life experiences actually of people's reputations that they've worked very hard to build, their careers, their safety first and foremost, actually, being under threat simply for expressing their identity or vocalizing truths. To protect their freedoms to express their identity. And I think to get to a stage where more of us can do that, we need the backing of authorities, of media, of faith leaders to you know, recognize the reality of what's happening and support us in addressing these realities. So yeah, thank you for the platform, and thank you for holding this, and look forward to hearing the rest of the speakers.
Vida, thank you very much for stepping forward. As I said, it's really appreciated. You know, it's I think something that everybody needs to recognize, that the identity, our religious identity, is what was used as the basis for attacking us. And much of the evidence that yourself and others have collated support this one assertion. There is no other common denominator. There is no other reason why we were identified and isolated as a group. And there is no justification other than the straw man, some sort of nonsense about BJP, RSS, and all of that straw man vilification, which has been used as justification. Both of those are going to prove, I think, to be problematic. And if we do take advantage of this moment to improve our communications in our own community, but also with other communities, we can use this moment to make sure that this type of approach to public life doesn't actually become a part of the public story. We have to stop people who assume they have the right to just completely randomly adopt a very feral way of engaging and then try and conceal the reasons behind a storm of fake news. So thank you very much for that. And I look forward to again meeting and speaking in person, Speaker One. Thank you for your participation this morning. I'm going to move on now to one of the team who took up the challenge, who, seeing that there was a vacuum and that the narrative that was being told was a completely false narrative, one that we didn't recognize. And this is a young lady who is a part of the REACH team. And so hopefully we will be able to pull her in at this moment in time. Here she comes, Gayatri. I don't know, can you hear us?
Yeah,
oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining. Gayatri, you have the floor.
Yeah, so I wanted to start from the list of evidences we had, and there is an overwhelming evidence about the hate crimes that has been committed in Leicester. And we have seen that over past few years, BBC has been featuring India in a bad light under Prime Minister Modi ji's rule. They show that there is an increased intolerance on minority nationalism and bringing nationalism into a bad light. So I'm not sure, like, why are we failing to counter that narrative over here in the mainstream media when we have so much of evidence, people which is piling up against the Islamist. Our umbrella body, whoever it is in UK for representing Hindus, have failed us, have failed in providing any kind of justification or statement or taking action against BBC or Guardian. This is
if I could just interject, and maybe you weren't aware of this, but we are going to have a deep dive session where we'll have a conversation with the leaders of the various organizations. And so if we can leave their involvement and their reaction out of it just for the time being, we will have a great opportunity to talk. I'm very confident that all of the communities using the resources at their disposal, once they had recovered from the shock of what had happened, then had to reconfigure and work out how best to engage. But we will have a deep dive session into the way in which the community now works internally, but also how it represents itself externally in a subsequent time. But I recall that REACH were amongst the first to actually start the counter narrative. Can I just ask you, do your REACH team have experience in all of this? Are you all sort of social media experts, or are you just a group of people who came together, a group of Hindus who saw this void and then decided that you needed to contribute something?
Yeah, so we actually coordinated with the team inside. So first few reports when it came from the police itself declining that certain things or misinformation is being passed in social media, we picked it up immediately, and in the social media we were able to justify and bring out the truth, and that's how we were able to build a counter narrative against the false information that some of the organizations were passing. For example, 5 pillars were constantly giving certain tweets and information that this RSS and Hindutva elements are involved, but which was not true. We are normal Hindu people. We are who go every day to temple, or how come Hindutva element can involve over here in violence and all? We are not that kind of people. We are very much in uniting others. So that's how we started building counter narrative. We spotted some few Islamists who were giving hate speeches against Hindus. So we collected all those evidences and made a file record. And inside also, I would like to give thanks to them to create a thread on that and piling up the evidence. So that's we work together, I would say.
No, that was wonderful. As said, we were hoping to have somebody from Insight joining us this morning, but travel arrangements have prevented them from being able to do that. But we do absolutely acknowledge the incredible work that REACH and Insight took upon themselves to engage in and deliver. Very, very helpful. We've had other social media groups, we've had other influencers who also stepped forward, many of whom said, actually, we're not yet ready to step into a public position on this, but we're more than ready to help amplify and to disseminate what was correct. So yeah, fully acknowledge the contribution from REACH and from Insight in this space. Thank you. Gayatri, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make before I move to Kapilji for closing remarks? Any guidance, any advice, any general observations from having observed the social media streams for the last 2-3 weeks?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that maybe any mainstream media such as BBC, New York Times, or Guardian, they have this. If you observe, they have a common thing, that's like building a false narrative against the Hindu perception. I don't want my future to be in a situation where my children would be afraid to say Jai Shri Ram or any sort of chants. So and I want us like a free environment where I would be able to say anything about my religion and preach about it. So we need all the Indians, all the Hindus need to unite among ourselves to debunk this bigotry beliefs that other mainstream media is building against us. So that's my closing remarks for today, and thank you, Panditji, for inviting me. Yeah.
Gayatri, a pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you so much for that. And so we are going to have a deeper dive into each of those various activities and sessions. We are going to explore in detail each and every remark that the BBC made. We're going to explore in detail exactly what the Guardian contributed as well. So we will at that time invite Insight and Reach to participate with us and join in trying to produce a file which is, shall we say, select committee suitable. But thank you, Gayatriji, and we echo your sentiments, and Jai Shri Ram to you.
Jai Shri Ram.
Kapilji, so we've had a few speakers, and I think the consensus that is coming out is what we knew it to be, the reality that we were targeted by a fake media narrative that was intended to disguise the actions that were being perpetrated on the ground and to conceal criminality and to somehow justify criminality. You know, we will have a deeper dive, shall we say, investigation into the manner in which the police and the authorities responded. But do you have any thoughts about what our community should do on a much broader and wider basis to be better equipped and to be better able to participate in the responses that we've got to engage in now?
Absolutely. I think one of the most fundamental things that we need to do, and something that I've been saying for, I think, probably close to 2 decades now, but it's not been picked up, maybe due to resources and so on. And that is that we need to have a similar entity to the Community Security Trust that the Jewish community have got. We need something very powerful, something that is resourced quite significantly, a resource that actually makes sure that we've got experts, legal experts, media experts, experts in every field who can actually advise us correctly, so that at every single point, every single step that we take is in fact correct. And we challenge the oppressors. We actually challenge those who are anti-Hindu. These are Hindu-phobic people in the media. They've gone out of their way to willfully demean and to undermine our community, to actually sow discord. This could have resulted in something significantly nastier than what we saw, had it not actually been for the greatness of Hindus, who actually absorbed so much pain themselves in order to save the rest of society. And someday society will actually understand that this was a sacrifice of this one community that has been the most perfect community of integration in this nation, that has worked for the well-being of this nation. So I think there's a lot we can do. We can take, for example, as you rightly said, once the files are ready, it's time to challenge the BBC and take them to task. It's time to take the Guardian to task. It's time to actually expose these journalists for what they are. And if necessary, how about really taking some serious court action against them? Yes, it's costly, and we assume that this community will actually come up trumps and actually resource this. But if we are serious, the resources are required, and if the resources are available, we can actually take these people through the legal process. We do it correctly, not like others who just throw a tantrum and then cry when they've been caught out. No, we do it correctly. We follow the law of the land and we make a point. And finally, politically, we need to make a point. We need to let those who speak on our behalf say, when will you speak on our behalf? 2 people did, Bob and Teresa. And let's just note this, throughout this process of 3, 4, 5 weeks, on the floor of the House of Commons, the only 2 MPs who spoke, they spoke in favor of Hindus. There was not one MP, not even one MP from the Labour side, which constantly demeans us, where they actually had the guts to stand up and actually say that the Islamists were correct. Just think about this. We actually are in a position where, for the first time, we stopped them, and we're going to stop them completely. Thank you.
Wise words, Kapilji. Thank you. And I think as we draw to a close, there are a couple of points that are worth repeating. One is that the fake narrative that was being built up, the only way in which we managed to rebut it is because enough Hindu youngsters and some not so young people had decided a while ago that they needed to have Twitter accounts, that they needed to have Zoom accounts, they needed to have social media accounts. And it's worth everybody understanding that this is not just a luxury anymore. This is the space where voices and consensus are now being built in a very short space of time. And so, so many people approach me and say, Satishji, what can I do? And the first thing I say to people, do you have a Twitter account? Do you follow Kapilji? Do you follow Reach? Do you follow me? Do you follow the others? Because if you haven't even yet made those simple, basic things that can participate, can contribute, then there is a starting point there. Please take note of that. The other thing that I'm going to just share now is we were hoping to have a session on the police starting in a few moments' time. And as participants in that, we had dear Chris Blackburn, who is an academic and a commentator on this. We had Sarah Gates, who was going to participate. And I'm afraid both of them have just messaged. Chris's flight is delayed, so he's stuck in a transit lounge somewhere and unable to get in touch with us. Sarah, dear Sarah, who is over in Australia, she's got a small emergency and can't join in. But I think now that we have established the mechanisms, now that we've got the platform up and running, now that we understand how easy it is for us all to be able to, one, disseminate news, but also to come together to understand and talk about these things on this platform, I think we will call that as another event in the very near future. Please, can I ask everybody to do 2 or 3 things? One is follow Chitti Media, who are our partners in streaming this and making sure it's available to the public. 2, register your details if you haven't already registered on our hinducampaigns.com platform. That's the platform which is sponsoring and hosting this event. 3, please follow Kapilji on his Twitter handle, and the link to it will be below. And please follow myself on the British Hindu. Many of you already do. Thank you so much for that. And that way we can keep in touch with you and let you know exactly what's going on. Now, we have created a container within which we're going to gather everything that we need to do in order to be able to respond to the BBC, to governments and to parliamentarians as the weeks ahead of us progress. Please remember that this is only the beginning. This is not going to end. At this moment in time, if I give you an example, the police have arrested a large number of people, but there were hundreds of acts of criminality. Each and every one of those acts of criminality, ideally, should be registered and should be noted. Remember, there was that young English chap who posted a questionable, semi-humorous tweet and was arrested because one person found that tweet to be offensive. Here we have a totally different scale of criminality. And this process is going to go as follows. The police have arrested people, charges will be brought. Once charges are brought, they're presented to the Crown Prosecution Service. The CPS will then make a decision. And it may well be that hardly anybody is presented in front of a judge and a jury, and then decisions made. We need to be monitoring this, and we can only do that if we're actually engaging with each other and acting with some sort of coordination. So please, the journey has only just started. Secondly, I know that we have a lot of our younger community members who are quite traumatized by this. Many of them have not experienced. Kapilji, you started at the beginning in 1993, 24 of our temples, I recall, were attacked, and over £1.5 million of damage was done to those temples. This is more horrific from one point of view, but materially, it's actually been less of an act of violence. It's hurt us and harmed us, the vilification has, but there are other dimensions where it's not been as severe. And so some of us who have seen this for a longer period of time are perhaps better equipped to weather it. And so I'd shout out to the younger members, those of you who are feeling still disturbed, still traumatized, still very, very uncomfortable about venturing out and experiencing what it is to be a Hindu. 1, try and find a little bit of courage, but 2, find a little bit of support. There is lots of support available in the groups that I've mentioned, Insight and Reach. They're doing wonderful work. They're very easy to connect with, and they were amongst the first people to get hands and bodies on the ground supporting the people who are being targeted. And I know that the support they've given has been incredible. So if you are feeling vulnerable, you are feeling in a situation which is very, very difficult, please reach out. There's lots of help available. and that would be an absolute imperative. Finally, my apologies if we had some technical hiccups at the beginning. As I mentioned, trying to put a global stream together is not something to be entertained casually. And we've had a couple of challenges, and we'll move forward and learn from those. But thank you so much for your patience. But most of all, thank you for joining in on this Sunday. We will be having a session probably next Sunday. You'll see the details posted on the hinducampaigns.com website. Above all, we are in Navratri and Diwali is on the horizon. The best way to respond to darkness is with light. The best way to respond to those who want to dim your light is to shine even brighter. The best way to respond to those who want to stifle your voice is to raise your voice in dance and song and celebration of Devi Shakti like we always do during Navratri. So please don't shrink, don't become smaller. If anything, it's more important that we get rid of whatever darkness was created by becoming even brighter, more ebullient, more joyful, reach out to more members of the community, have the garbas even longer than we do in the past, and let's proceed to try and repair the harm that has been done. Kapilji, if you have any final words, please do so. But thank you to everybody. I really appreciate your time, your support, and your patience.
The only thing to say at the end of that is to say a great big namaste to everyone and to say it's time to go. Jai Sara.
Jai Shri Ram, everybody, and Jai Devi, Jai Shakti, Har Har Mahadev. Enjoy Diwali, and we hope to speak with you soon.